Hi guys, welcome back to HNM Storytime. I'm Miss Samantha and it is October 31st. We're done with October. This is crazy. We've learned so much. We've learned about Noah, about Abram, and then his name was Abraham. And so now we're going to learn a little bit more about Isaac. Remember, God promised Abram and then Abraham that you're gonna have a kid, and then your kid's gonna have a kid, and you're gonna have a huge family. Well, Isaac was born and then he grew and he's almost ready to get married. So our story is called Abraham's Servant Finds a Wife for Isaac. So this is a pretty interesting story, but we're gonna learn about this one in Genesis chapter 24, verses 1 all the way to 67. Very long story, so we're just gonna read a little bit. Isaac grew up and soon it was time for him to get married. Abraham talked to his servant. He said, "Promise me that you will find a wife for my son Isaac." His servant promised to do his very best. Abraham said, "Isaac can't marry someone from Canaan. They don't love God. You have to go find him someone from my homeland where my father was, because those people love God." Abraham's servant said, "Okay, should I take Isaac with me?" Abraham said, no, because what if the girl doesn't want to leave and Isaac has to stay there? But then God said, my people, my children have to stay here in Canaan, because otherwise how are they going to be in charge of the land? So Abraham told his servant, "You go and then bring the girl back to marry Isaac." Sounds good. So the servant loaded many gifts on some camels. He traveled through the hot, dry desert to the land where Abraham used to live. Abraham's servant stopped by the well in a town to get some water because it was so hot he was thirsty. The servant asked God to show him who Isaac's new wife would be. He was praying that God, whoever comes and gets some water for herself and her family, if I ask her for some water, she'll say, "Okay, here you go. Oh, and also here's some water for your camels." So while he was praying that, a beautiful woman named Rebecca came to the well. Abraham's servant asked her to get him some water. She gave him a drink and then she said, "Oh, I'll give some water to your camels too." Rebecca worked hard pouring water into the watering trough until the thirsty camels had enough water. Abraham's servant knew that this kind person was the one God wanted to be Isaac's wife. So he asked her name and she told him, "My name is Rebecca." He said, "Who is your father?" And she invited him to dinner so he could meet her family. At dinner, Abraham's servant told Rebecca's family the whole story. How God asked Abraham to leave his home, how God promised him a huge family, how he had a son named Isaac, and how he was looking for a wife who loved God to go back to Canaan to live with Isaac. Rebecca's family was so excited. They were sad that Rebecca was going to leave, but they were excited that God had chosen her to be Isaac's wife. Abraham's servant was glad that God answered his prayer, and Rebecca was happy to be Isaac's wife. Alright, so there's a lot in here. You might have a lot of questions, but we're gonna go find Mr. Eli and talk about our story and then learn our verse. You ready? Let's go. Alright, I found him. So, what do you think about our story?
That was a very interesting story of how God wanted someone to go find a wife by using camels. Has God ever asked you to do something interesting or you thought was weird like that?
Weird, yes. Using camels? No, never used camels before. So I think a theme here, all the way from Noah to Abram, then when God changed his name to Abraham, and now with Isaac and their servant that's trying to find a wife for him, it's God's promise. When God says he's going to do something, it could be weird and crazy, but it's going to work. It's going to happen because God promised it. All right, let's learn our last verse for the month of October. Genesis 24, verse 14. It says, "I will ask one for a drink, and if she says yes and waters my camels too, she is the right one." All right, let's see if we can do it together. Ready? Ready?
Ready.
Ready? Ready. Genesis 24, verse 14.
Genesis 24, verse 14.
"I will ask one for a drink,
I will ask one for a drink,
and if she says yes
and if she says yes
and waters my camels too,
and waters my camels too,
She is the right one.
She is the right one.
All right, let's do that again. You ready to do it again?
Yep.
You ready to do it again? I need you to be a little bit louder, okay? Genesis 24, verse 14.
Genesis 24, verse 14.
I will ask one for a drink.
I will ask one for a drink.
And if she says yes,
And if she says yes,
and waters my camels too,
and waters my camels too,
she is the right one.
she is the right one.
Okay, let's do it one more time. Ready, set, go. Genesis 24, verse 14.
Genesis 24, verse 14.
I will ask one for a drink.
I will ask one for a drink.
And if she says yes,
And if she says yes,
and waters my camels too,
and waters my camels too,
she is the right one.
she is the right one.
I think it's an interesting verse to match our interesting story, but you need to remember this in your head and hide it in your heart because it helps you remember our Bible story. And all the things in the Bible are important. Like this one helps us remember that God keeps his promises. So remember this verse for this story, and we will see you next month in November. Thanks for coming to today's H&M Storytime. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.